Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Stan coming to you from Gainesville, and today we'll be discussing failing the quiz. I have a hot plate, bouncing red light, and I might have over-designed it a bit. All on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
I heard about you guys about 6 years ago, and I can't believe you're still here.
Yeah, that's true.
Full of dust.
That's true. Well, we had this guy named Stan K, but, we lost him. He's gone somewhere.
No, he's a floating lumen.
He's a floater.
What can we say?
Right.
I'm a floater.
In the rock and roll industry, we call them a hired gun. But unfortunately, we don't pay anything, so there you go.
Tell me about it. I know. I've lost 20% already just being here.
I think they call them that in the porn industry, too.
Hired guns?
Ooh.
Okay. They used to be known as fluffers, but we now have magic pills for that.
Well, no, they call them in the theater, don't they call them swings?
Swings, yes, swings.
I'm a swinger.
Yeah, there's swings in porn too, but that's a whole nother different situation.
Would you stop going there? I'm a happily married man.
First of all, welcome everyone to episode 292. And we want to thank Zach for being with us last week, and we had a lot of fun last week. And let's move on to news. Well, the big news today is URTA is announcing that their Designer and Technician Showcase at LDI is on November 19th. And registration actually ended yesterday, so you're out of luck. So there you go. I have a feeling they're going to probably extend it again, don't you?
Oh, I don't know if you're out of luck. I bet if you call URTA right now,
right,
I bet you. Yeah, I mean, it's a big convention center. There's space there. I bet there's space for a table for you. I give them a call and tell them I said call.
Yeah. Well, they want to stress that this is an opportunity that is open to students and alumni at both the graduate and undergraduate level. So it could be anyone of any age. As long as you're either a first-year student as an undergrad, they used to be called freshmen, but for some reason that's taboo now. You can't say freshman. And all the way up to graduate work. So if you want to show your stuff, get in touch with URTA, okay? All right. Any other news of the week that we need to talk about?
I'm coming to California.
Okay.
If everything works out.
Hey, how was your sabbatical? Didn't you just take a trip up to Washington?
I did.
Yeah, and?
Well, I am... well-schooled in some concepts around wireless lighting, which we're going to talk about later, wireless control. Mm-hmm. I got well-schooled in that. I evaluated with my dear colleague Scott Rosenfeld 3 museums. Let's say the largest wireless control system probably in the world, 12,500 fixtures controlled wirelessly at American Art in the National Portrait Gallery. I got an in-depth explanation of that. And then we did some evaluations of the new National Air and Space Museum, which got a major renovation with 3 different designers, and we walked around and critiqued that. And then some time in natural history, particularly around the display of Old Glory, the flag that Martha Washington made for the Revolutionary War. And it is so thin, it's thinner than 1 ply of toilet paper.
Toilet paper thin.
But illuminating that is challenging, and how that was done was really interesting to learn about. So it was a lot of museums. I also went to see, for leisure, the Van Gogh immersion that was in D.C., and I enjoyed that a lot.
So listen, in other words, this sabbatical is more of faculty development, more than like, you're not writing a book or you're not designing something. It's research, and you're doing like faculty development, right?
Absolutely. And I would, can I plug the webinar?
You already did on the show. Now it's going to cost you money.
Can I plug it again?
It's going to cost you some money. Okay, sure. Plug it again. When is it? It's like in 2 weeks, right?
So the other part of my sabbatical is we put together a group of lighting designers from a broad spectrum of the industry, museums, architecture, hospitality, concerts, live performance, you name it. And we're going to talk about how lighting programs can be more holistic in terms of preparing students for sustainable careers, not just stage. And that's happening in November, and I know we're promoting it on the Facebook group, and maybe Steve will be kind enough to put it on the website too.
When in November?
November 11th, I believe.
How much does it cost?
If you are a student, it's $25 for a 1-year membership to the Illuminating Engineering Society.
That's worth it right there. That's worth it. Absolutely. Yeah. You should be a member.
Normal membership is, I am.
No, I'm talking about the students should be members because that's how you meet people.
Getting into IES will open up a lot of doors for students. They may not be aware of it because it's an engineering society, but it's lighting designers, right?
Yeah.
Who are part of it. Yeah.
That's how you make connections.
There's a student membership and $25 a year. It's kind of like,
it's a no-brainer
to do that.
It's a no-brainer. And they have parties. You can go to these parties and you get to meet people and you get to network. It is really worth $25.
Well, it's a great networking opportunity because there's an IES chapter almost everywhere. I mean, even where I live. And so you get to meet engineers, architects, designers, manufacturers, and you really, definitely a good thing to be a part of. And then I'm coming to California to hang out with some of our former guests, Jeff Ravitz and Ian Militello and Mark Brickman. And they're going to teach me everything that Jeff put in the book even better.
Wow. That's pretty cool. And then you're going to LDI.
And then LDI will do our shtick.
Right.
The Lumen, the photons, we'll be doing our thing there. Let me say this. I've been isolated for 2 years and everybody knows I have a condition. So we went for a week to DC. We traveled public transportation. We wore a mask when it made sense. We didn't wear a mask when it didn't make sense. We came back, no COVID. So I feel like I can be more in the world now, just being careful.
All right. So let's get started with our listener questions. And Steve has our first question today.
And this is from Haley in my hometown of Dallas. And Haley writes, my teacher just gave a quiz, and we all missed the same question. What kind of lighting angle does not hit the subject but still illuminates him? Haley, did you cut class that day? Did you cut class? I mean, angle is an odd word to use, but I'm going to suggest that the correct answer is silhouette. A silhouette lights the subject, still illuminates them, but doesn't directly hit them. I don't know. What you guys are shaking your head.
Technically, I disagree with that because it's not.
Go for it.
Because what a silhouette is a shadow of an object in front of something that's lit. The subject is not lit. They're a shadow.
And your answer so that Haley can go to class this week?
Well, I mean, it's a matter of semantics. I would say reflected light would hit the subject. It's not intended to hit it. But light is coming off another surface and illuminating the subject because light is actually hitting them.
That's good. Good. I like that.
David, you stole my thunder. You stole it.
Well, no, this is that first LDI we did. That first show we did at LDI. That was like the gray light question that you got, Stan.
Well, that was the stump stand question, but I got it.
Yeah, and you got it.
Yeah, but and I will say something about that. Well, I have a story that came up yesterday too. So that. The quality of reflected light is very different than the quality of direct light. And I ask my students all the time when we're outside, I say, what are the two different kinds of natural light from the sun? And they really don't actually make the distinction that there's sunlight, which is when you're standing directly in the sun, there's a very sharp shadow. It's very clear definition on the subject. And then there's skylight, which is the light that's reflected from the clouds. It's secondary, and it has a softer quality. Sometimes it's even shadowless. And I think that distinction between direct and indirect, we talk about it a lot in architecture, but I think that's the answer. And the angle of the reflected light, to David's point. So that's exactly where my mind went as well, David, was to indirect light.
Magic time, remember? Magic time. Because that's what happens. The atmosphere is reflecting the light, the sunlight all over the place, and everything is soft, and everyone looks great.
Can I make a technical comment about indirect light? For the longest time in architecture, you would sort of avoid indirect light. Everybody sort of admitted that indirect light has advantages, but it was very inefficient because you don't get as much light from something that's reflected. Every time the light is reflected, you lose energy. So you couldn't to get the light levels that you would need to meet a particular standard, direct light was better. But I made once we got LEDs and LEDs became more efficient. So now you're 90% more efficient than an incandescent lamp. Great, but what can you do with that efficiency? And my argument was, well, now you can use more bounce light. You can use more indirect light, spend some of that efficiency on indirect to get a quality that we normally would say was costly from a design standpoint.
Wow.
Does that make sense? Am I making sense with that?
Yeah, But it's called magic time when the sun actually goes underneath the horizon and it's bouncing all
that's
that
a real
beautiful
time.
light in real time, which is why a lot of people like to film during that time because it pretty much wipes out
photograph during
shadows.
I have an app called Magic Hour. Wherever I am in the world, it tells me there's an app for that. It tells you when magic time is happening.
Hey, listen, buddy, if you want a magic hour, just take one of those gummies and it gets very magical in about an hour. All right. Arlene from Knoxville asks, I am lighting a show with the rear projection screen about 15 feet upstage of the plaster line, and the floor is painted a bright red. The director has the actors blocked inches away from the screen, but that's not the problem. The problem is that whenever I use front light, the set and screen turns red, and the actors' eye sockets have some red in them as well. Help! She actually wrote help in there with 3 exclamation marks. Well, speaking of reflected light, what is happening there? Well, it's really quite simple. I would bet that whenever you hit this actor with front light, the light is going to continue and it's going to hit the floor. And if the floor is red, it's going to reflect red light, the red wavelengths of light, up along the angle of incidence to whatever direction is that light is traveling. And if it's front light, it's probably going right up stage. And therefore, you are going to basically have all this red light that's hitting the set and the projection screen. So what do you do about that? Stan?
Me?
Yeah, or anybody. Or Steve?
Don't use direct front light.
Well,
you can light
but what if you have to use direct front light?
If you have to use direct
front light?
Okay,
it's a projection show, so we all know that the best way of lighting a show like this is from the side. But what happens when that director says, I need some front light on that person?
Okay, well, I would say this. Okay, I'll just start with this, and maybe I'm wrong. But when you're doing vertical illumination versus horizontal illumination, because of where your eye is located, you don't need as much. So if you think about it, that actor is standing there and you're hitting them from the front and the light bounces directly back at your eye. So you don't need as much. So I would suggest that you balance the cue so that you're only using as much front light as necessary. And then the amount of light bouncing off the red floor is minimized, and yet you're still hitting the subject. So just dial it back. When you're lighting straight on front light, and the angle of reflection is direct back to the audience. It's like lighting a mirror because it's vertical illumination. So just bring it up delicately. That's my first instinct.
What else can you do? That's a good instinct, and that is a good thing to do. You need to balance the light, right? Absolutely. But what else could you do to help the situation?
Am I on trial here?
No. I'm going to ask Steve. Steve, what else could you do to help the situation?
I don't know. I'm kind of thinking if you soften the light, you're going to have less bounce.
Okay, that's
diffuse
true,
it, Steve. In other words, diffuse it out.
Yeah, that helps. But I'm going to tell you the trick that I learned, because there was a time.
I'm waiting with bated breath.
There was a time in my career when I had all these red floors because I worked with a scene designer who loved red floors.
So this was your red phase, right?
It was my red phase. That's right. And I was going crazy because it literally, the actor's eyes underneath would be red. That's how much light would bounce off these floors, especially if they're a high gloss floor. So I'll tell you what I did.
Wait, can I guess?
Sure.
You put some green in the front light.
Absolutely. You put some green in the front light. So you choose a color that is more on the green side. Now, when we say green, it's not green. We're talking about something in the green palette. There's a problem with that, though, Stan. And that is the light that you're lighting them with is going to gray out the floor a bit. So how do you solve that problem?
There's some downlight, some red downlight on the floor.
Exactly, backlight. You have a backlight system just to activate the red, and that will.
I'm scoring with you today. I can't believe it.
Excellent. You won. You win both prizes, which are basally two shot glasses.
Do I get a fez?
Yes.
I want two fezzes now.
No, you get one fez. That's it.
Actually, I want Neil Giampoulos' beaver coat is what I really want.
Well, I don't know who has Neil's beaver coat. But that being said, we're having an issue with the fezzes. That the fezzes are actually back at the factory because there was a defect.
No.
No. We'll get them. I mean, they're on rush, okay? There was a defect that we're solving. It was a slight issue.
My goodness.
It was a slight issue with the stickers and the fezzes.
Supply chain again?
No. It's going to be fine. I just wanted to tell you guys that, that we had to return them briefly so that they could work on them in the laboratory so that they can make sure they're perfect for the 6 lucky questioners, the listeners who are going to be actually stumping us with questions like these.
You put microchips in the fezzes, didn't you? You're installing microchips.
No, microchips. It's not. This is no conspiracy theory. This has to do with an adhesive problem. Okay, so there's an adhesive problem. That's all I'm saying. But we're solving the issue.
A glue issue.
It's an issue with the glue, and we're just going to solve it. So don't worry about it.
Let's use airplane glue. We can put the airplane glue on the fez in a brown paper bag.
You know what we should do?
Then take a gummy.
Yes, gummies. I think that should be our swag.
Next year.
Yeah, because we have like 3 pieces of swag. If you come to our show, you may get 3 pieces of swag.
We're gonna let the Lumen Brother fans get stolen.
You're guaranteed with 2 pieces of swag this year, and you may get, if you're one of 6 lucky people, you'll get a 3rd piece of swag. Although that's an award, but that's all right. Okay,
and that's going to be a gummy.
No, not gummies. That's next year. Okay.
Next year, okay.
Light Talk gummies.
It can be vitamin D gummies.
There you go.
Vitamin D gummies. I already got those.
More like Viagra gummies. Anyway, Stan's your question.
Okay. So we answered that. Well, that was cool. So I didn't. So a little bit of green tint in the front light to counteract the red, and some red activation
from the backlight.
Yeah.
So that it bounces out. It doesn't bounce on the set.
Yeah, I'm writing that down.
He's writing that down.
Okay, so Marco wants to know, how do I know when I'm over designing something? Yeah, that's an interesting. That's an interesting.
That's an easy one. Don't you think?
Okay, go ahead. You answer it.
Well, the easy one is when you're noticing the lights. That's when I would. I think so. It's when you're not thinking about the story, or you're not getting the story, and you're just looking at the damn lights.
But there are moments where the lights are the story, maybe. Special effects. Depends on where if it's a concert or, but I was thinking on a technical basis, like, I think when we design now in AutoCAD, it's really easy to click without thinking about things. And so if you just keep clicking, and putting stuff down, you can end up putting in equipment you don't really need. And I saw some of that on this sabbatical. So now, I wonder, because I don't have the answer, is it because the designer was under pressure and was just covering their butt by plopping a lot of lights down, I'll figure it out later, or they were really thoughtful? So I think if you can't really explain why you're putting something down, let me give an example. I saw a situation in a room, oh my God, maybe it was 10 by 12 or whatever, small space. And all it had were graphics on the walls. And then you had like source for desires, like a $2,000 lights with amazing capabilities, just lighting up a graphic. That's over designing to me. You didn't need a fixture like that. So why did that happen? So I don't know. I think you have to just start to be conscious of not just plopping things down thoughtlessly. But I do wonder sometimes if the process was such that a well-known, thoughtful designer wasn't getting the information they needed. And so they just kind of, a lot of cover their butt kind of activity. So how do you know is when you are not being thoughtful about every choice you make.
You know you're over-designing when you start looking at the light plot and smiling a lot, and you start, and you're at tech and you go, that's going to be a really good photograph. Or you say things, look at that red, man, look at that red. And you notice the entire room is staring at you. And also, I think what happens is that if you're objective and you try to be an audience member, which is a hard thing to do, but you have to ask yourself, David touched on this, am I looking at the actor? Or am I staring up at the lights moving in the air? Am I congratulating myself for the really clever use of a gobo somewhere? I think once you're no longer interested in the play and you're just kind of appeasing yourself, I think that's a good indication that you're starting to over-design something. You're going down a path that doesn't support the production. Sometimes the lighting designer, sometimes you need to be invisible. And I even think that at rock and roll shows. I think you can go to rock and roll shows and it was just perfect. And the lighting was great. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think you go out to your car and you start talking about the lighting. I think you start talking about the music and the performance on stage and everything that was wonderful about it. But if you go out to your car and you're starting, to chat about the lights, then maybe that lighting designer didn't do the band any favor. Did himself a lot of favors, but not the band.
You are listening to Light Talk, and today Light Talk presents episode 5 of The Lighting Guy, Panic in the Zoo.
Hang on to your C-wrench, true believers. It's time for Bobby Danger, The Lighting Guy, starring Bobby Danger, a.k.a. The Lighting Guy, and his 2 assistants, Bucky and Becky, and stage manager Tracy. And now, episode 5, Panic in the Zoo. The plane from Shanghai had landed, and like that, Bobby Danger was home. He had been on sabbatical, gathering material for his new book, the book that would guarantee tenure. The Mirror Ball, a misunderstood resource. He smiled when he thought about the title. Bobby had only been gone 2 weeks. His replacement was a young hotshot, fresh out of grad school, one of those fancy back east New England schools. But then came the pleading phone call from Doc. The answering machine still echoed in his head.
He's not good enough. Not as good as you. I need you, Bobby. This is a bad one, the worst yet. I need the old lighting guy. I need your magic.
Leaving baggage claim behind, Bobby Danger stepped into a dark night with a cold rain falling. Whatever it was, it could wait until morning. The next day, Bobby Danger drove to the city zoo, where Doc was developing his latest masterpiece, a fresh, modern adaptation of Billy Shakespeare's Hamlet. It would be a semi-contrived with a touch of expressionistic naturalism, a hipster retelling of Hamlet in a found space dominated by wild animals. The audience surrounded by animals, dangerous animals barely contained. As Bobby Danger walked past the penguin cage and over to the set, it was clear no one was happy. The director was the first to speak.
Hold! Everybody stop! I need more light! This is Hamlet, for God's sake! Must I cancel the opening night? Ah!
A quick glance told the story. Bucky, sitting at the console, had that look, a 1,000-yard stare. Becky was binge-eating chocolates to relieve her tension, and stage manager Tracy was staring at Chandler, the new LD. She put a fine razor edge on her Swiss Army knife. Chandler, the sabbatical replacement, looked dazed and confused. His magic sheet was crumpled in his right hand and was clearly distracted by the noise coming from the penguins which surrounded the set. It was not good. Chaos had erupted. All work had stopped. During the confusion, Bobby Danger stepped into a porta-potty. With a blink of an eye, Bobby Danger was out of his khakis and his fancy silk tie. He was out of his Brooks Brothers blazer, and he removed his Rolex. Then he slipped into tattered jeans, a faded yellow Izod t-shirt, a small gold earring was in his left ear, and he wore a pair of weathered, snakeskin Tony llamas. Bobby Danger, mild-mannered university assistant professor, non-tenured, had become the lighting guy. His voice cut through the calls and screams of the zoo animals. What you guys need is some non-motivated light. Becky spat out her chocolates and shouted,
Bobby? Bobby! Where did you come from?
Stage manager Tracy put away her Swiss Army knife and said,
Hello, Danger. I guess the sheriff is back in town.
And Bucky put on his vintage high-end programming gloves. Chandler was taken off guard. He wasn't sure of himself anymore. Too much water had passed under the bridge. His confidence, like the last fish in the penguin cage, was gone. Suffering from jet lag, Bobby Danger was in no mood to coddle anyone. Your Fresnels, man, use your damn Fresnels. That was all it took, and like a bat out of hell, Chandler had been set free to find his inner designer.
It's time to go back to work, Bucky.
Ready, boss?
Fresnel's at full. Gobo's at full. That psych needs color. Hit me with some purple. And swing those vipers downstage. Blind the audience. Bang them in, Bucky. Hot and sharp and full. Don't hold back.
And like that, the lighting guy had saved the day and a young designer to boot. The director was the first to speak.
Hold, everybody stop. I love it. Color, gobos, and a purple psych. Hamlet lives. I am blinded by the moving lights downstage in my face. But that's a good metaphor for the blindness of revenge we explore here tonight. Blind the audience more.
Bobby Danger called a team meeting, and Chandler was the first to speak.
I thought I had all the answers. Back east, things were simple. Just use a lot of Lee 201 and run everything at 5%. And if you get in trouble, touch a mover onto a face. And boom, hello, Tony. But I got here, and it's different. And it's big. You know what I mean? The American West, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain, and the waving wheat can sure smell sweet when the wind comes right behind the rain.
Becky cut him off mid-sentence.
Bless your heart, sweetie. That's Oklahoma. You are in Texas, and we are a whole other country.
Bobby Danger, the lighting guy, folks. Tune in next week for episode 6, The Rails of Disaster.
Wow. What a guy. And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those rabid monkeys prancing about the studio tells us that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about wireless control. What is the current state of the technology? Well, Stan, in his research sabbatical, actually has a few things to say about this. So, Stan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you discovered?
On my sabbatical, I was up at the American Art and National Portrait Gallery, where they just spent, I'll just say, a considerable sum of money to write a specification for a wireless control system that would be the largest wireless controlled lighting system in any museum, if not maybe any place in the world, and to do that experiment and see how it worked. But I was a little confused. I thought it was all about controlling the lighting. It was more than that. So here's the interesting information. There's 12,500 fixtures in those two buildings. I don't know if we have an entertainment venue with that number of fixtures. And they opted, to my surprise, not to go with a wireless DMX or some other wireless system, but they chose to do it in Bluetooth. When if anybody's got a Bluetooth headset or a Bluetooth phone, you know that that's a fairly low energy situation. There's only so much distance. But interestingly for them, it works for them because they had a lot of fixtures built with Bluetooth chips in them. So they can roll a cart with a computer and an antenna, be underneath a fixture, which is how they work, turn it on, control its intensity, control its color temperature within this system, anywhere in this large museum, which is great. And now, of course, they're dealing with the choices that they had. Now they can do dynamic control. They've got theater, basically. But I didn't really understand till I was there why Bluetooth. Well, it wasn't just for the lighting. Once they put in a Bluetooth backbone throughout the entire facility, they can collect data. And data is the future. And so for them, other interesting factors besides controlling the light, they know how long the light is on, how bright it is, how much damage it might be doing to an object. And then they can add additional sensors. What's the humidity in the gallery? What's the temperature? How many people are in here? And when are they in here? And if we can turn off the light when nobody's in here or turn it down, we increase the longevity of the artifact. So it was really part and parcel of the wireless lighting control. It was also about other forms of data collection that make the museum more efficient, more capable. So I was surprised that it was a Bluetooth choice, but the Bluetooth choice was a more broadly kind of infrastructure that gives them a lot of other things. They really wanted DMX is unidirectional. ACN, of course, is bidirectional, and I'm not sure if multiverse is. And ACN software that ETC gives out for free, the code, but they really wanted that data exchange back and forth, and so they went with Raspberry Pis in the ceiling and routers and Bluetooth, and the manufacturer put the Bluetooth into all these new fixtures, which have a beautiful LED engine. So, I think it's coming. I haven't put a lot of wireless control in the theaters that we do yet. And that's a question I'd like to talk about, for what you guys feel. Are we ready to trust it? Or are we still tethered to wires, which we know are much more robust?
I have to say, I'm going to admit, I'm still a little scared of 100% wireless. I still have some fear in the back of my mind. And I'm wondering if that can be alleviated if I have a really expensive, high-end system that, you're paying for that kind of stability.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that's where I am in the theaters that we do. We have not gone 100% wireless. Some places have. I'm in the same boat that Steve is in. I'm just a little bit not ready for that. But I think it's probably coming.
Let me tell you a little story from an industry that's about 800 times larger than the theatrical design industry. And that is the live musical performance industry. When I set up my keyboard rig, for a show, there are about, probably 12 wired cables that go from my keyboards into mixers, into other sound modules. They not only carry sound through normal copper wire, but also data. And yes, there's Bluetooth out there, but a lot of people don't trust Bluetooth. And I actually have a wireless mixer that's actually very stable. But believe me, if they were able to make this wireless type of data transfer and also connections, whether it be through sound cable or through data cable, robust and dependable, everybody be using them.
That's the experiment they're doing with our tax dollars. They are running that. They are using a fairly large museum. This is the National Portrait Gallery and the American Art Museum. That's a pretty big rig, and they spent a lot of money to test it. And so they're using the museum as a lab. So I bring that for our listeners to kind of ponder that's where we're trying to get there. And I don't know if Bluetooth, but they did Bluetooth for a different reason, and they work differently because they actually, they roll around the museum with a cart with an antenna. It's different than what we do, but I think there's a lot of activity in that space. And think how much, if you could get it robust. We use it at UF for we need a light in the trap room. We don't have a DMX plug. We put a show baby down there. We use it, and it's been pretty stable. But when we talk about although I will say this, we were using black tracks on the last production here, and that's got some, there's a lot of cameras talking to other things. It's wired, and it had, stability problems. So Don't know. Just raising it as a question, but that's what I think. That's where we're starting to see the experimentation.
Are other companies using it out there? Are other architectural lighting firms using what you're thinking about using? Are they doing it right now?
I don't know.
It's
a good
because
question.
that would tell you if it's ready for the industry. Yeah, I think.
No, you make a good point because architecture is huge and theater is tiny compared to that.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved to LED before we did. I mean, I was going to Light Fair and you couldn't find an incandescent bulb anywhere, right? So I think, but interestingly, I'm doing a project where we have to retrofit house lights, and the company that made the lamp said, "Yeah, we have an LED retrofit for that, but it comes with 0 to 10 control." And I went, 0 to 10? That means I got to run a wire to every fixture. Don't you have a DMX or a Dolly or an ArtNet? Oh, yeah, we can do a DMX module for you, but it'll cost you 30% more. So in some ways, they're behind. They're behind in certain control. In other ways, they're ahead. So that's a good question. I have to think about that, how much we are. Well, it's a good question for someone like Chip Israel, who does these massive casinos, and these big restaurants. How much are they doing it wirelessly?
Yeah.
I know my acoustics people do what they call an API. They'll put the mixer on an iPad. So there's a physical mixer in the spaces, but if you don't need that, you can walk around with your iPad and control the sound, right?
Well, they're finally getting to a point where wireless headsets work, but they still aren't as good and clear as wired headsets. So if there's interference on that line, there's going to be interference on any sort of digital line, right?
Yeah, it's a good point, David. I have questionable cell service here at the house, so it's really been driving me crazy, and I need good audio. So I just moved to a new VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol telephone system. It's going to run me about $19 a month, and I got a new phone, and it just got working, and the audio is better. So now, David and Steve, you need to call me on my old home number and not on the cell number, now that it's working. But because the wireless hitting tower after tower and tower and all that is not giving me the fidelity that my ears need. So I think it's a big question going forward, and let's see.
All right. Well, Steve has the last question of the day.
Yes, it comes from Josh in Utah, and he says, I am doing a show that has a hot plate on stage. Can I just run that on a dimmer parked at full and control it as a non-dim? Can you? Well, sure. You can do a lot of things. You can hit yourself in the face with a hammer. You can do all kinds of stuff. I think a hot plate is, in my personal opinion, I think a hot plate's kind of scary to run on a parked dimmer. I think a dimmer does something really well, and it switches on and off very fast, and there's a sine wave that's kind of nice, and everything's kind of controlled. I think you would be much better off having a dedicated, non-dimmed circuit rather than parking a dimmer at full. I would be a little hesitant to do that. I'm sure there are people who are cursing and beating on their computer screens right now saying, I run my dimmers parked at full all the time and run fog machines on them. I just don't think the dimmer is really built to do that. So I probably would not do it. I just don't think it's a good idea. Also, what happens if some jamoke at your console unparks your dimmer? And now you've got all kinds of problems because now they're going, I'll fade it up. I'll have to fade it out. What's going on? So I know that's out there and kind of probably won't happen land, but I just think there's problems doing that. Also, I think you have to be really careful about what hot plates you put in there. Hot plates run 900 to 1,000, 1,500 watts, and you can get hot plates that are 1,800 watts and much, much higher, depending on what you want the hot plate to do. And even if you go to an induction, if you want rapid boiling on stage, you want, you throw that hot plate in there. You throw in some herbs and you're trying to get some odor on stage. You probably don't want that to sit there and work for 30 minutes. You want that thing to go, thermonuclear in 5 seconds. And I don't think an induction plate is much better. What do you guys do? Do you put hot plates on dimmers?
I have nuanced thoughts about this. Okay, I have nuanced thoughts. So I think Steve covered it pretty well, but I'm kind of asking myself a why. So if it's, I don't know what he's using it for. Is it like a kitchen on stage, or is he doing fog effects, or what's the purpose of the hot plate? But I can't, if you could put it to just a straight outlet with a switch, and you can put a switch in, or if the hot plate has an on-off switch, then just power it. I'm not sure why he's putting it to a dimmer. Just maybe it's because he doesn't have a circuit, and that's the most convenient thing. I don't think it's a big problem running it that way. Technically, it's not a motor, which will not like the chopped sine wave. It's a resistive load, like a filament, the hot plate is. So I don't think you're going to harm either the hot plate or the dimmer from a technical perspective. But the question is, why do that? Do you need, if you need within the show a way to turn it on and off, right, then I would not use if you're using ETC products, we'll use them as an example, not use a D20, but get a real non-dim module, in which case 0% is off and anything above 0% is on. Then it's just like an outlet in the wall that you're probably safe. But to Steve's point, it's in the board. So, do you need that level of control over the hot plate? That's the question.
Hell yes. They're making broccoli.
Well, all right. Well, then if they're then if they need, I'm thinking about the Sam Shepard play, and in that play, let's put it in context. There's a toaster. You have all these toasters on stage, and all the toasters have to go off at the same time. It's a technical challenge. Now, in a case where you could time each toaster and know how long it takes from the time it's on till the time it pops, and you need to activate the toasters through the console because of this complex demand of the script, maybe. But I think there are maybe better ways to do your hot plate, like Steve has already mentioned, than a dimmer. Unless
you have a resistance dimmer or an auto transformer
Who the
rack.
hell has that anymore?
I'm sure someone's got one.
I don't think the SCR is going to hurt a hot plate.
Oh,
I don't think
all right.
If it was a motor, then yeah.
Hot plates. Okay. All right. Let's talk about gummies. Go back to the gummies.
I have to go order mine now. Can I go? I got to order my gummies.
Well, the rocking sounds of Illuminoids tells us that once again you spent another morning listening to hot plates. You spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you happen to do something illegal like me and eat a gummy, or decide to litigate us, the Snoop Group with the legal team of Sparks, Burnout, and Chase will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Republic of Texas.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about more lighting shenanigans and serve you much more of our casserole of nonsense.
On a hot plate.
On a hot plate. Light Talk. Serving you hot plates and broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Sayonara.